that's on fire. Thank God for movies. Welcome back to Thank God for Movies. I'm John Negroni from the San Francisco Bay Area, one of the co-founders of In Between Drafts, editors, stuff like that. Also, with us we have the one, the only, the Pittsburgh native himself, writer at Comic Book Resources. You know him, I know him. His name is Will Ashton.
Hello, hello.
How's it going, Will?
Hanging in there, enjoying my last hour of being a 32-year-old.
Look at that. Somebody's about to have a bit of a birthday.
Yeah, if I wasn't already having some existential crises with this movie we're talking about being from a guy nearly half my age, get to have that on my plate as well.
That's right. Today we're going to be talking about Backrooms, the box office sensation. I actually want to kind of start with that today and take a look at the new releases this past week. We had a few new films hit the cinema, and there's a big story around how Obsession and Backrooms have just been tag teaming the heck out of Star Wars, Mandalorian, and Grogu. These two horror, I think people had expectations. They're like, these two horror films, super young directors are probably going to do really well. A lot of people were predicting they were going to have good box office, but stacking up against a Star Wars movie that came out over Memorial Day weekend and now outpacing this movie, so much so that He-Man Masters of the Universe, that new flick, I was supposed to watch it tonight and I missed it, but I missed my screening tonight, unfortunately. But they are now going to be putting that in a bunch of IMAX screens because apparently it's a safer bet than the Star Wars movie, which dropped off big time in its second weekend. Well, what do you make of all this? I mean, this is huge. This is like a moment.
Yeah, I mean, I find it funny that they think He-Man is a safer bet for a number of reasons, but partly because I think at last I saw, Scary Movie 2026 is also supposed to outpace He-Man. So even with that in mind, they're still like, we'd rather put He-Man, Masters of the Universe.
IMAX thing, right? I mean, I don't think Scary Movie is something that people are going to be like, I gotta see that on the biggest screen.
But yeah, regardless, I think just the fact that I think most people kind of expected very little of He-Man, and I have heard at least some early good reactions from the film. So I was kind of down on it, but I'm willing to give it a shot at some point. But yeah, I mean, just nobody cares about Mandalorian and Grogu or however you pronounce it. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's a changing of the tides. It does feel like this past weekend really announced, if it wasn't already being announced, this transition as far as what Gen Z has in terms of an appetite for cinema at this point.
Right. I think that Gen Z is always kind of played by the beat of their own drum, to quote Vivo, one of their favorite movies. You know, it reminds me of when the Gentle Minions thing happened, and just the last Minions movie, a lot of Gen Z people just showed up and gave that thing a ton of box office, kind of as a meme. And it does feel like Backrooms and Obsession, it's like the next evolution of that, where they're not really meme movies. They just are movies that Gen Z genuinely wants to go see, right? And we'll get to it. We talk a little bit more about Backrooms in detail and what our various experiences were and all that, but you know what it kind of reminds me of? It reminds me of like those turning points, those inflections in cinema throughout the ages. You always have these kinds of like it's like you're kind of saying, like the tide is sort of turning, something is changing, like the calculus is changing a little bit. I think people assumed that was sort of the case with like Oppenheimer and Barbie. That was like, whoa, this is like a big thing for like the double feature. That didn't really play out though. I feel like those two movies, while like I enjoyed them, I think you enjoyed them. I mean, they didn't really like herald this like wave of anything. It just seemed like a blip to me.
I think it was just the novelty of two disparate films, two very different films. One that was, you know, traditionally more masculine, and one that was traditionally more feminine. You know, just having the pictures of them back to back, like black and white stark photo of Cillian Murphy versus the colorful pink and blue Barbie. It was just like kind of one of those, not ironic entirely, but like just sort of these movies are so ill-fitting together that they're perfect together kind of phenomenons. And yeah, I mean, I think Barbie was always going to do those numbers. I think it was just the way that Oppenheimer was elevated with that is kind of amazing in a good way. I mean, obviously, really panned out for Oppenheimer, and I'm sure it's going to pan out for the Odyssey as well, without a Barbenheimer sort of sensation going with it. But yeah, I mean, I think as far as this is concerned, I didn't expect Obsession to do as well as it did. I had a feeling Backrooms was going to kind of be in a similar vein to like the Five Nights at Freddy's thing. It just seemed like that was something that, maybe with a more online generation, they were just more attuned to. To them, that's a bigger IP maybe at this point, or at least it's something that's more novel of an IP than the 15th or 16th Star Wars film. Yeah, I mean, I still think that Sean Levy, Ryan Gosling Star Wars movie is probably going to do pretty well. Like, I think this is not so much like a complete changing of the tides. I think that movie will probably make decent business and will do what it needs to do. But I think hopefully what this will usher in beyond an even bigger influx of horror films, which is interesting its own route because I think last year there was kind of a dip in horror films. Like a lot of the films that were in that genre weren't
Oh,
doing as well as.
Weapons did pretty well,
But
right? I
before
mean,
that, yeah, that was like in August. But I mean, like in the first half of 2025, I remember there were a lot of horror films that didn't quite meet the
were they like
expectations of
more
their.
studio horror films? Like that's kind of what I mean, right? Because like to
It
me
was like
right now, well, no, to me right now, the hype it's about the hype. The hype isn't
sure,
for the Star Wars movie. There's not even that much hype for the Spider-Man movie, honestly. The
mm,
hype is for these like original things. Like Odyssey is like an original thing. Project Hail Mary was original, and the hype was around that movie. Whereas you had the sequel to Super Mario, it didn't do nearly as well. Critics didn't like it as much, and yeah, I think we're seeing like more and more of these like smaller, like cheaper films come out and do way better than anyone expected.
yeah,
I was gonna bring up Pressure. I mean, Pressure came out. I saw it the other day. Reviewed it for Thank God for Movies. Like not based on existing IP. It's just kind of this like mid-budget kind of thing you would have expected to see in like the early '90s, and it's doing totally well for like within its right and getting really good reviews. And I don't know. I'm just saying, it's like I just feel like audiences like attitudes have shifted a bit like ever so slightly to
yeah.
maybe not want another big blockbuster thing that like we don't have, they don't their hands don't have to be held as much. Like they want to go to the movies as long as the movie looks good. Who would have thought?
I mean, well, the one thing that should obviously be said is it was always a safer bet economically to, put your eggs in a lot of baskets as opposed to put all of them in one basket and just hoping people find and love that basket. I mean, that's kind of been the trouble with blockbuster cinema in recent years is that studios were more likely to spend 150, 200 million, 250 million on some property rather than just, spending 50 million or less on less sure bets, but hoping at least, a handful of those take off and make the profit that they need to. It's just smarter economics. But yeah, I mean, I think that would be my hope is that, they realize that's kind of just a smarter money is you need to champion the smaller films. That's just what Hollywood was based on. That's why cinema was more alive, in the 80s and 90s compared to the 2010s or even the 2000s to an extent. It's just that you have more originality, you have more democracy as a viewer. If you kind of do different things and let the populace kind of pick what they want and all that. And so that would be the hope is as far as moving forward. But
You want to know
yeah,
my
I mean, I
hot
think
take?
what's that?
I have a hot take on this, or a theory. I'll just call it a theory. I don't know if it's a hot take. I genuinely believe that the reason we're seeing this like kind of shift over the last couple of years is because up until now, like the last like decade plus of like these big movies, the decisions have been made by producers and
Sure.
executive producers and all of these people who are baby boomers. And so many of them are retiring. A lot of millennials and Gen Xers have been kind of shifting up. And I think that whatever energy or chemistry is happening between the kind of new old guard, which is the kind of aging Gen Xers in their 50s, and the millennials who are getting into their 40s and late 30s, I think that there is just like more of a congruence of like this is the taste. This is what people want. They want movies like this. And I think that there's a shift because they're the ones who are greenlighting these projects, saying yes to
Sure.
these things, acquiring them at festivals. And I just think the last few years I've seen a little bit of a shift. Like it seems like they're doing a better job. And I think one of the reasons they weren't is because you had this bottleneck of like the baby boomers who just were so far removed from like the Gen Xers. We see it in all stages of like society right now. Where
Hmm.
like the baby boomer disconnect. They have a ton of power. They have a ton of wealth in our society. And I think because they're aging out, this is one of the many sort of like dominoes that's falling. That's a theory. It's a theory.
I mean, it makes sense. I think my theory, and maybe it's just my kind of short-sighted view of things, but I think there was a time when audiences kind of followed formation as far as these sort of films go, like Marvel and stuff. Like they were still crowd events. There were still things that kind of felt like you got together, like there were surprises that you could only experience originally and organically, like that first weekend if you see Spider-Man, whatever, and all this stuff. And I feel like probably because of the pandemic, but also maybe just with the influx of bigger movies feeling more cinematic again, I think people just have rightfully bigger expectations. And something like Mandalorian and Grogu, for one, it not only looks like a TV or streaming film, but it never justify itself as being like, well, this is why you need to see it in theaters. This is why you shouldn't wait to, just watch it on Disney Plus, which is what I think by and large 3/4 of people are going to do is just wait and see that movie. It's just because they were conditioned to think, Star Wars is now TV content. Marvel is TV and movies, but a lot of it's TV. And it's just like, you condition your audience to feel a certain way. Whereas with like Obsession or Backrooms, it's like people feel like it's cinematic to want to like go with the group of people and experience this film that everyone's talking about, or see something that it feels like a collective experience. Whereas I just don't feel like that's really been the case with like what Disney's putting out in a lot of cases. And we'll see if that's the case with like Moana, the live action remake or whatever. But that's my theory or hot take or whatever you want to call it.
I did want to bring it because like there's that movie Breadwinner that came out. Looks like it'll be a bit of a flop. Not great reviews, great audience reactions, but I mean, $25 million reported budget. It only made $7 million in a weekend. So that's an example of like, okay, a comedy, big comedy star, comedian star guy has his own TV show that comes on after Wheel of Fortune, and there you go. Not really working. Then you have something like Sheep Detectives. Sheep Detectives cost apparently around like $75 million, and it made $103 million worldwide. It's still going. Like, and people are talking about Sheep Detectives. It still baffles me. Don't get me wrong, but there's another original movie that seems to just kind of click with people. They're like, give me those Sheep Detectives. What are they going to solve next?
I mean, I get what you're saying because like yesterday after work, I was just looking like, I wasn't planning on it, but I drove into work and I was like, maybe if I'm up for it, I'll see a movie. And the only times that really lined up that I wanted to see was Sheep Detective. And I was like, I mean, I hear all these people saying all these things about Sheep Detectives, which, even 2 months earlier, I'd be like, I wouldn't, think about going to see Sheep Detectives, let alone by myself. But now all these people say it's like, the feel-good family movie of the year or whatever. And it's like, well, I guess I got to meet these sheeps in their detective ways.
And then you have Michael, which is probably going to hit $1 billion pretty soon. Huge hit for the studio there. So yeah, I mean we're seeing kind of like I don't want to call it a resurgence, but I do think we're seeing like a wave. Right now, time will tell if it's a wave that's lasts and is going to have more ripples and it's going to continue. This could obviously be similar to Barbenheimer, a blip for whatever reason, some weird anomaly that happened. Summer 2026, mark it on your calendar. But I don't know because I mean it has been a strong late spring, early summer with movies like Is God Is, I Love Boosters, which you saw. I actually don't know. Did you like I Love Boosters? What was your 1 to 2 sentence reaction to it?
I liked it. I think the visuals are there. I don't know if the script is, but I would recommend it.
Literally your exact same review of Sorry to Bother You, the last Boots Riley feature. So I appreciate that. I didn't bring up Hokum, but more people are starting to watch Hokum, which I think kind of got like a little bit of a muted reaction at first, but I think it's kind of like riding a little bit off of Backrooms and Obsession. Like some people are like, man, my horror fix still isn't satiated. And there's like still a couple of theaters that are showing Hokum with Adam Scott. Maybe I should check that out. And I know a few people who went ahead and did that this past weekend. So I don't know what's going on there either because I haven't seen that film yet. So great horror wave that we're getting. Kind of reminds me of like the 70s a little bit, right? Coming out of the wave of the 1960s, the dip that happened in cinema, in American cinema, and like musicals were kind of on the way out. Westerns were way out at that point. And there was just this feeling. I mean, it's so similar, right? Because like the Westerns had gone more to TV, similar to like the superhero stuff. All the blockbuster stuff's on TV now. Everybody's just watching The Boys and Invincible and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Where are the event movies? Well, that's kind of what happened in the 70s. Is you see these huge like tentpole films based on books that not a lot of people had read, or I don't know for sure, I wasn't around, but like The Godfather, obviously, and then you have like Bonnie and Clyde, kind of bringing in the 1970s, and you have Conversation. I mean, it's just like a wave of these like independent films, the ones that Quentin Tarantino was raised on, and so I don't know that optimistically we could be seeing that happening in the kind of midpoint of the 2020s of like maybe someday they'll look back and be like, yeah, this was kind of like one of those turning points where we really started to see these like young Gen Z filmmakers come out with these like low budget, big hit films that the studios couldn't wrap their heads around. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I
I'd like to
mean,
think that'll happen.
I think it was a given that the superhero phase would phase out. I think that's what's been said for like over 10 years now is that it's going to go like the way of the Western or the musical. I just,
It was Scorsese who said that, right?
Spielberg,
Or
I
was it
believe.
Spielberg?
But
Funny
yeah, I
enough, he
mean,
has his own original movie coming out, and I'm gonna be
which
seeing
is
that next week.
getting great reviews or great early reactions at least. So
The
I'm very
Furious is
excited.
about to come out, and people are saying it's like the
Oh
best
yeah,
action movie since The Raid.
I'm excited for that one. Yeah,
Holy smokes! I mean, we're gonna be eating good this summer, apparently.
I hope so. I mean, you know, we could use some winners. That's for sure.
Well, let's see if Backrooms is a winner. I want to talk about that one with you now. And now that I'm all excited, I want to, of course, get brought back down to earth. I'm ready for your harsh takes. Actually, I have no idea what you think of this movie yet. You just watched it tonight. I saw this one a few days ago. I want to compare what our audiences look like because I think that has so much to do with the experience of watching this movie. But for those of you who don't know what Backrooms is, I'll set you up here. So Backrooms is a new kind of like semi-sci-fi, surrealist, psychological horror film. It's a lot of things. It's like a mixture. It's a bit of a stew of different genres. But psychological thriller slash horror is like the closest, description you're probably going to get. It was directed and co-scored by Kane Parsons. This is his feature-length directorial debut, is written by Will Sudik. A lot of executive producers here because this is an oddball of a movie in terms of how it was made, because specifically it's based on Kane Parsons' web series, and it's inspired by this creepy pasta, this series of like meme creepy posts about these like yellow, seemingly never ending maze like rooms. Started in the 20 teens on 4chan. It evolved into this just kind of like Slender Man a little bit. Now Kane Parsons is one of the ones who really popularized it. His YouTube channel, he used his YouTube channel to create these sort of short films that sort of like turned the Backrooms into its own kind of, YouTube cinematic universe, if you will. And this movie is essentially supposed to be some sort of like extension of that. He said that it actually fits within his work that he did in his YouTube channel. It doesn't conflict with it in any way, which is interesting. I know a lot of people who saw those videos on YouTube at least once or had heard about them. So when this movie started hitting like, the trailers and the posters, people were like, what the heck? This is actually happening. It seemed like a
Mhm.
fever dream. Chiwetel Ejiofor is in this. Renato Reinsev. I mean, Mark Duplass, Finn Bennett, Lakita Maxwell from Shrinking. I mean, this is it's a legitimate cast, right? You look at the producers, it is a treasure trove. You mentioned Sean Levy before, but we also have Osgood Perkins, Michael Clear, James Wan, Roberto Patino, Dan Cohen, Dan Levine. It goes on, right? So clearly you have this sort of like circle of trust. It kind of reminds me of like the Pixar producers and how that usually works when you have like somebody directing a Pixar movie, but really it's like this brain trust and that's why you kind of see them, like on the credits. That's what it reminds me of, especially because Kane Parsons, for those of you who don't know, the guy is only 20 years old as of this recording. He's either 20 or he just turned 21. Yeah, he's still 20. He turns 21 literally in like a couple of weeks. So this is a super young filmmaker. He's the youngest filmmaker that A24 has ever brought on to direct a feature. So it's kind of wild. And I think their bet, again, this kind of goes back to my theory from before. I think their bet was like, yeah, these like viral web series, if you do them right and you put them in the hands of the creator, a guy like this who seems to be really talented, who like was really, really smart with his YouTube channel to like, if you watch those videos, like the stuff he's using is like basic software to like make it look like 90s kind of, pixels and stuff like that. It's called Blender, is what he used. It's super creative and crafty. And considering the budget of this movie, $10 million, it has so far made $117 million, right? Unbelievable success story for A24 right here.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna set up the plot, but did you have any reaction to that? Because I know it seems like you're having a bit of a crisis existentially with this.
Well, just the general stuff that comes with a birthday, I guess. But no, I mean, it was like you said, one of those things where I remember, I watched at least one of these videos back in the day, maybe when the project was first announced, and it was like one of those things where like I remember, I think he was like still the filmmaker was still in high school or whatever when like he got this deal and
Yeah.
like people were like joking but not joking like, well, he has to graduate before he can make the movie and all this stuff. And, it was like at some point it finally came together, all this stuff. And yeah, I mean, I feel like the vibe of it almost kind of feels like a feature length adaptation of a like VHS segment, like in the series VHS. Yeah, the way it
That's a good
uses
read, yeah.
the way it plays with like the old fashioned, like you said, video like retro nostalgic lens, the found footage style to amplify and kind of heighten the atmosphere of it. Especially considering, ironically, how many of those VHS movies the segments veer so far from the core concept of it being something that's found on a VHS tape. I feel like this guy, I'm sure he has a lot of opportunities ahead of him, but the producers of VHS would be foolhardy if they didn't at least seek him out to do a segment because he's clearly the guy to do it.
He's the youngest director to top the box office. That's another thing for him. I mean, for reference, like Orson Welles is obviously known for being super young when he made Citizen Kane, but he was still 25 when he made that film. Just saying. Now he does have some stuff that he's like set to do next. I forget what it is, but yeah, he similar to Curry Barker. Yeah, folks have already hired him for some upcoming projects, and so yeah, like you said, definitely has some stuff ahead. Especially like I think he has like a bit of a musical side to him. He co-wrote the score here, as I mentioned, with who else did the music? Ido Van Bremen. Now, in terms of what the film's about, I'm gonna try to be careful with this because I want to make sure like for folks who are like maybe on the fence and if they're feeling like what, I do want to go see this. I do think it's great if you can just watch this without knowing anything about it. I didn't watch the trailers, and I'm so glad I didn't because it was so fun to be there with the characters and being like, what is going on? Like being in the same boat as them really made it a unique experience for me. Especially because I hadn't seen the YouTube videos either, so I really had no idea what I was in for. That's it. If you want to know a little bit more, no problem. The basic setup is that you have a furniture store owner named Clark. He's the one played by Chiwetel Ejiofor. And you also have his therapist, Mary, played by Renata Reinsve. You'll remember her from Sentimental Value, Worst Person in the World. For those of you who watched Presumed Innocent, the Apple TV show as well. And yeah, Ejiofor, I mean, we've seen him in how many things at this point? I know Cloverfield Paradox, still our most popular episode we've ever done. And that's an Ejiofor movie. Still don't know why it's our most popular episode ever in Cinemaholics / Thank God for Movies history, but what are you gonna do? Anyway, so the basic setup is that Clark has been going to his therapist, Mary, talking to him, trying to process his grief. He got kicked out of his house. He's now sleeping in the furniture store. He doesn't seem to understand like why, like why is this happening to me? He's really down on his like his furniture store is clearly failing. Throughout the movie, like you never see a customer in there, to really drive it home. It's also set in the Bay Area in the 1990s, which of course is where I live. I don't live in Silicon Valley, but I used to live in Silicon Valley. And I know, Will, you've been to Silicon Valley with me before. So you probably like watching this movie being like, hey, I know that. I know that house, but not really. But anyway, so the basic setup is that Clark has been trying to figure all this stuff out. He's kind of just at his wit's end. He finds this weird area in the basement of his furniture store that seemingly gives him access to these back rooms, these rooms that don't make any sense. They have a bunch of furniture piled in weird places, and the rooms seem to be shaped in a very particular way. It's super surreal, and he can't seem to stop himself from wanting to explore it, even at the cost of his own sanity. Eventually, Mary gets pulled in as well, along with our supporting players. I mentioned Finn Bennett and Lakita Maxwell from before. So that's the basic setup. I'm leaving a lot out in terms of what happens in this movie. My reaction to it is I think this movie is great. I think that it has a couple of, not fatal flaws, but I do think it has like some pretty glaring flaws in terms of like you can see where like some of the executive producers were like, you gotta kind of have a little bit of a Hollywoodified story to this. I don't think it always works that much, but I think it's like pretty minor in terms of like I kind of think this movie nails it. I think it's really good. I don't think it's like amazing or anything like that. But just specifically, like taking you on a ride and keeping you guessing and like the different sequences and like going back and forth between now we're in this kind of POV sequence, I think it works really well. And I think like one of the reasons it works for me is because it's like about something. There is like a deep substance to this. I read it in a very specific way that I in my review of the movie, which I give like a light spoiler warning to it about partway through. I have like my own read of the film and like what I think it's about. And I don't really want to get into it because it might give too much away, but it does speak to it. Let's just say an anxiety that a lot of us have these days in terms of like the slop era that I found just kind of poignant and original and different. And I just, yeah, great performances, great score, a couple of scenes that were really freaking scary. I was in it. What did you think, Will?
Like this movie. I thought it was good. Yeah, I was surprised that I end up liking this one, at least as of now. Like I said, I just watched it a few hours ago. I think I like this one a little bit more than Obsession. And I think part of the reason why, and that's not to discredit Obsession, I think it does several things well, and I can see why it's become a big hit as well. And it's exciting to see a movie that small become such a huge hit. But I think that movie, like, it what you see is basically what you get. Like, I feel like it makes its themes pretty explicit. Like, it takes some turns, but I don't feel like it really surprises. I don't know if you'll agree or disagree. It seems like some folks might disagree, but I felt like not a lot of things in Obsession really took me aback. It's kind of like plays out what I expected it to, but it's really fun and it's so confident and it has a lot of really strong performances and it does announce a new filmmaker in a fun, interesting way. But I think this movie, what I appreciate and what kind of throws me off about it being from a 20-year-old filmmaker, I was going to say 20 something, but he's literally 20, is that it has some fair restraint. It is a movie that doesn't really announce itself early on. It kind of trusts itself to play out and let the atmosphere build. And I think, as you mentioned, like it maybe takes some conventional turns in the screenplay that may not have been the original conceit. Maybe that's the adults in the room kind of pushing it a certain way. I do wonder. I saw some people were, trying to kind of take away the credibility. And his name's Kane Parsons, right?
That's right.
Okay. I was going to say Kane Pearsons. I wanted to make sure.
That would be a very Will Ashton thing to do.
Kane Parsons. Some people were trying to make a case for like Osgood Perkins co-directed it because he's a producer on the film. Maybe like other folks kind of guided him along. I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if like they may have just been like, well, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you're wondering, here's my suggestion or here's my advice or whatever. I could certainly see that being the case with Osgood Perkins as far as like the flashback scenes with Renee Renault's character do feel very of a piece with the.
So Renata Ryan said, yeah.
Those scenes, like, they feel very Osgood Perkins-esque. I mean, maybe he, like, did some, like, reshoots or something, but that's the only real time I felt like it felt like somebody else was potentially guiding or driving the truck. And those scenes are pretty few and far between, to be honest. I think it is really astounding to me how confident and how unique it is to its own style and how much it's willing to lean into the atmosphere of it, have these really compelling ideas. I think it plays out. And, like you're saying, like, a little bit more substance than what initially leads on. Maybe that's part of the reason why I end up liking this a little bit more than Obsession, is that I feel like I went into Obsession expecting that commentary, expecting that stuff, and it became a little bit more disappointing because I felt like I was expecting it to elevate a little bit more than it did, whereas this movie, I was kind of going in for the atmosphere and the vibes. It has that, but then when it has some actually interesting things to say through there, it impresses me and only makes me appreciate it more for what it's able to do from such a young filmmaker. So, yeah, I think this is a cool little movie. It's nifty, as I would use that term for Obsession as well. But, like, I think this one feels like a fully realized film in a way that actually makes me really excited to see what this filmmaker, not to say that I wasn't excited for Curry Baker, but I feel like this feels like so fully realized in a way that I'm really, really curious to see where this filmmaker is going to go with the next few films, or many films, really, of his career, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think where we agree for sure is that, yeah, this feels like a complete film. I mean, that was my complaint with Obsession was that I felt like it was missing something. I don't think this movie's missing anything. I think if anything, it maybe had a little too much. There was a moment where I thought, like, the movie might have ended or would have been a good place for it to end, but it kept going, and I was like, "Okay, I'm with you still," and that's arguable in, like, maybe on, like, a rewatch
Oh,
or something, right?
I will say, and I won't give away the context of it, but a kind of funny thing happened to me while I was watching the film, which is just around that point, without getting into specifics, the theater like lost power, so the screen cut off, and
That's
I was like,
amazing.
"Whoa!" Like a crazy point to end the film, and but
It's like
then
a
like it came back
Sopranos
on,
twist.
yeah, but then like the lights came back on, and they had to like start the film back like a scene early or whatever. But like I was, for a brief moment, I figured something had happened, but there was a brief moment where I was like, Kane, you are really swinging for the fences, but
Yeah, so yeah, and I think where I disagree a little bit, I prefer Obsession just subjectively. I feel like Obsession I found that movie a little bit more entertaining, right? I found it, like, from start to finish, I was fully in, and I had such a blast just, like, relishing in how twisted it was. I think a lot of it is because I found, like, the central performance of it too to be super, super memorable and, like, "Oh my gosh, this is just too much. This is like a roller coaster right here." Versus, like, this movie, which is it's just different. It's more cerebral. It's way more intelligent. It's way more kinda like it's speaking to, like, a definitely, like, a deeper existential psychological dread, whereas Obsession was to what you're saying, it's more of, like, social commentary. It's almost kind of like a horror comedy in some respects, and it's just that's, like, a different kind of thing, right? A different set of expectations to have, which is why I think this is, like, a great double feature, like, such a good double feature, 2 one-word title horror movies from young filmmakers, and they kinda scratch 2 different itches for me, which is why I love that they both came out so close to each other. It's awesome in that way. And like with this movie specifically, I do want to say I think that the producers like they for sure mentored this guy. Like I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think that first of all, that's very common, right? That is not out of the ordinary for
oh,
these
yeah,
producers to come in and kind of like help these like young
to
directors in
be
certain ways.
yeah, I mean, to be clear, there's a difference between mentoring, which is what is to be expected, and I think partly
Yeah.
what their producer obligation would be outside of
You're
financial.
talking more of like backseat directing.
People are complaining or suggesting that these guys actually directed the film,
Which
which
I
might
think is
be,
like, if you don't have evidence, I think that that's kind of a lame thing to, like,
I
take
mean,
away from this guy. I mean, I don't know.
well, for one, it's like Sean Levy's style is so anonymous. I feel like there has to be no way that he would involve himself. I don't know. I mean, I think people are potentially feeling like maybe James Wan or Osgood Perkins. And like I said, the only real time I felt like maybe someone else kind of had their hand in the pie was potentially those flashback scenes. And I just think it was maybe like him suggesting stuff, and maybe he just like he may not have directed it, they may have suggested things, but yeah, I don't think to be fair, like I think it's to be expected that he's,
Well,
getting
there is a
mentorship.
co-writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is a co-writer, so, like, yeah, I don't think that that's out of the question, but I just don't want people to be taking or, diminishing the hard work that I think Kane Parsons clearly put into this. If I'm wrong,
Right.
obviously
Yeah.
would wanna definitely know that for sure, but definitely wanna don't wanna jump to conclusions or make assumptions that, you know, we'll find out in his next movie. If it ends up being a big old, miss and
Oh, you talking like a Josh Trank situation?
yeah, yeah, pretty
Yeah.
much. Anyway, so yeah, there is that. Another thing that really stuck out to me about this is that, I just really felt like for Ejiofor in particular, I haven't been that impressed with him as an actor quite a while. Like I've liked him in some things, sure, but this is definitely one of my favorite performances from him. I know people look at like Children of Men, but really in the time in between like that movie and American Gangster and all that, I think 12 Years a Slave was very big for him. He was very good in that, of course, but I think there's just some other films like, that he was in that it just didn't really quite so there was like Boy Who Harnessed the Wind, obviously he was in like the Lion King stuff and, he did, Doctor Strange, he did all that. I don't know, but I just felt like we hadn't really seen him like this, like, dialed in. At least I hadn't seen him anything where he was this dialed in quite a while, so really happy to see him doing super well. Great year for Renata Reinsve, getting sentimental value. She was nominated for the Oscar, right? She didn't win, remembering that right?
For sentimental value, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so she got an Oscar nomination this year, and she, like, what's it? She had Fjord, which, premiered at Cannes, I think, like, won the Palme d'Or?
That's correct, yeah. Palm de
Yeah,
Fjord.
they're Palme de Fjord. There you go.
Palm de Fjord.
And now she's in, like, one of the biggest, like, A24 box office successes ever, and, like, this big, like, announcement of a movie. I mean, so yeah, great for both of these actors, and I think she's very good in the movie. I don't think it's anywhere near, like, as good as she can be as an actor, but she gets the
I
job
mean,
done. I think
I
Ejiofor gets to show your performance here.
right. I think she's fine. I like that people have been joking that, like,
It's
she's
pronounced
from
final girl.
yeah, okay.
You didn't like that?
I like
Oh.
that people have been joking that, she's from the slightly Norwegian section of San Jose, 'cause, like,
That's right.
bless her, I think she tries her best, but, like, that Norwegian accent does come out in a few choice words, especially
Yep.
towards the end, and it's like, "Alright, well, you just kinda have to let that go," I guess.
I don't mind it. I feel like, I find it a little bit charming. And also, if you live in the Bay Area, not maybe not necessarily in the '90s, but these days, you have a ton of people
Well,
from Europe who live here,
I
on,
think
like, H-1 visas and all that.
they're talking, like, natives of San
I
Jose.
know, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we have, like, a Norwegian, like, instead of Chinatown, we have, like, Norwegiaville or something, I don't know.
Well, I mean, there is a tragic sort of backstory to her character, and maybe she was just trained, in the ways of
Yeah, yeah,
Norway
yeah.
in there, yeah.
She was homeschooled. Let's put it that. The other thing I wanted to get into, my God, I love this production design. It's
Well, yeah.
immaculate to me. I
Sure,
mean,
yeah.
the choices of like, and you mentioned the restraint and the atmosphere, and that ties into the production design because you have all these chances for like jump scares and like cheap tricks to kind of get us freaked out. The movie holds back so much, and it just like lets you take in these these sets that they built, that they clearly built because like so much of it is just so convincing, and that's why there were times when I was a little nervous about like, oh, we're switching to the handheld camera, the kind of found footage style. We're doing like a Blair Witch Project thing. And I was like, oh my God, is this going to be the whole movie? But no. And I'm like, oh, are they just doing this to like hide like, some stuff that maybe wasn't quite as good? And they're using this perspective to kind of like skirt around. No, there's real craft. And like it switches around and you actually, then you see it and you're like, oh my gosh, like it's legitimate. It's like, it's just a movie with a lot of tricks up its sleeve in that sense. And I
Yeah.
was really I found it awesome, especially the practical effects. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, not to, throw this guy under the bus because I feel like I was already kind of, poking him in the ribs during our session review, but it is kind of funny to see this after Shelby Oaks, and that movie tries to balance the, found footage and the real, like, traditional narrative dramatic footage, and this movie just does the same thing so much better to the degree that, like, I mean, that movie was already, getting kicked to the ground as it is, and
I
then
just feel so bad for him because like first he was probably just licking his wounds after Obsession. And then he's like, all right, that's enough of that. Time to what's this movie? Backrooms?
well, it's just like that. I mean, Obsession is just more the fact that like a YouTuber came in and like totally ate his lunch. But like Backrooms has to be an even bigger defeat because not only is it a fellow YouTuber eating his lunch, but it's basically doing what he wanted to do, this Shyamalan esque like cerebral horror, and just doing it 10 times better and being like half his age. It's just like that has to be devastating.
I think
Yeah.
hey, it could get worse. Like the next thing could be like a 19-year-old filmmaker who did like YouTube movie reviews.
Oh, of course, yeah. Oh,
And
they already do. Yeah.
like and then like all of a sudden they make like, their version of, The Sixth Sense, but with like mice or something, who knows. Anyway, so I don't know. I'm just grabbing stuff out of a hat. Well, actually, you just got to keep up. Keep up.
Okay.
But yeah, great. I think it's a good movie. It's really fun to watch. I do think a couple of the sequences I was getting a little bit sleepy. I was like, oh my gosh. I think specifically when like Clark is like exploring the back rooms for the first time, I was like, all right, it's still going, still going.
I
I
normally would
liked
complain
it,
about
but it was a lot. It was pretty long.
I think maybe just because the production design is so good, I was liking it because it was just cool to vibe in there. Like, it helps you get into the guy's mindset. It's like, yeah, it's kind of cool in here. I don't think his a view of it towards the end is particularly sound, but like you get to spend some time in there with him. It's like, yeah, it's neat. It's weird. I can see why it's kind of like I kind of like that leisurely pace to it. It kind of just lets it really like feel like this other world experience.
What was your screening like? When your audience and everything. I know mine
Well,
was packed and mostly 20-year-olds.
it was mostly people around my age and my friend's age. It was maybe like 5 or so people.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was
Well,
just like a few of us.
that's surprising.
There were a lot of people when I saw Obsession, and that theater experience, I remember. I feel like it's kind of unfortunate that something negative happened for both experiences because when I saw Obsession, the air conditioning wasn't working, and I don't think it was properly masked.
What is happening
So
at these movie
I
theaters?
don't know. Well, the one
Pittsburgh
with
for you.
Backrooms at Medley, that was a power outage. That's nothing they could really control. I don't know what
Oh, fair
happened
enough,
with
fair enough.
the Obsession thing. That was kind of infuriating, but yeah, it is. I was surprised. I thought there would be more people, especially for an early evening screening of Backrooms. But maybe they're all in school.
Yeah, that's true, that's true. It is a Monday that you saw it. I saw it on a Thursday, and it was like a Thursday, like 4 o'clock. School was out. And wow, it was again, it was a very packed one. Let's take a look at what some of our friends had to say about the film. Our friend Isaac Feldberg gave it 3.5 stars. He said, "So cool of Nathan Fielder to let them film this at his summer house." The rare Isaac jokey letterbox review.
I did see some people did the rehearsal like, whoa, Door City here.
That's good. Oh man,
Yeah.
that's great. I like that. Ryan Oliver, friend of the show, gave it 4.5 stars. He wrote, "Wild watching this after the most recent found footage fest because while no spoilers, there is a scene toward the end that felt like it was directly pulling from a VHS tape featured on it. While I can acknowledge that there is some occasional dialogue that said more than it needed to, I was glued to and gripping my seat from the very first VHS tape segment to the final shot. Every single scene is filled with nerve-shredding dread and a sting of the roads not taken, and Parsons is so incredibly astute of developing these characters through the rooms. Every single frame is meticulously constructed to upset that an unabashedly surrealist and experimental horror film is going to open higher than the latest Star Wars film gives me hope for the future of movies. Also, I have never seen Chiwetel Ejiofor be this fun or this unnerving in a film before. Won't be for everyone, but go with a packed crowd and go in cold." One thing, yeah, I agree with that one note he said about, yeah, some of the dialogue did over explain a little bit. I think that was kind of what I was
Yeah.
gesturing at. Like, especially toward the end, there was some demystifying that happened that I didn't love. But that's okay. It didn't ruin the movie.
I mean, that's kind of the trade off when you have a character that's a therapist, I think.
That's true.
But I was chuckling to myself because he said, gives me hope when I was thinking it was a new hope.
Mm. Oh,
Yeah.
oh.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with a lot of what he was saying.
Also, Kemper Myers, friend of the show, gave it 3.5 stars and a heart. I didn't write anything, but we feel it. We feel it. Let's see. Friend of the show, Brogan, Luke Boas, also saw the movie. I believe he reviewed it for In Between Drafts, I want to say. And he gave it 4.5 stars. I think it was a 9 out of 10 that he gave it on In Between Drafts. I should know because I added his review to the Rotten Tomatoes. But anyway, he wrote, "For any film, this is a remarkable accomplishment. For a debut feature from a filmmaker who started working on the film when he was still in high school, it is something else entirely. How fortunate we are to have the opportunity to watch Parsons' career unfold from the ground floor." And I was right. Yes, he did. He did write this one for In Between Drafts. Here's a negative review, though, Will Ashton. Get ready for this. Friend of the show, Corey Everett, gave it 2.5 stars. 2.5, very low. He said, "Theater was packed with 20 somethings who applauded at the end. Not for me, but good for them." Not somebody who's been on the show before, but I think David Chen had a similar reaction to it. He was like, "Yeah, it's just not for me. Glad you all had a fun time, though." Emma Sasick, Auntie Emma, one of our dear friends of the show, gave it 4 stars. And Emma wrote, "Genuinely spooked by this. Walked out in a bit of a haze. Such an unnerving space to be in for nearly 2 hours. This is a solid debut. Maybe not everything works in the end, but the production design is true marvel. How they came up with all of those spaces and how on earth." Okay, so there's a little bit of a typo. So I said that wrong. How did they come up with all of those spaces and how on earth did they shoot this? That horrible yellow color, the harsh fluorescent lights, and ever-present buzzing will haunt my nightmares for the next couple of days too. Yeah,
Oh,
and
well,
yeah, yeah,
I was gonna say
very so
I
much.
believe they built all the sets.
Yeah,
It should be said. I mean, obviously, some of them have to be built. That would be
yeah,
insane. But a lot of them, I think, even the like general sets were like kind of built. I don't think they found a lot of locations for this, which is when I was going into it, kind of what I was expecting. So it was interesting for me, and it did really complement the production design, I will say.
They actually did film in a '90s furniture store. They just went back in time real quick.
Mm.
I don't think that was smart. Well, by the way, I love like it's like Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire, and it's like clearly like, even the movie like points it out. It's like wait, it's like a pirate, but like Turkish. Like what? Like I guess there were Turkish pirates, but it's clearly doing it anyway. Matt Donato, friend of the show. This is a more unique one. 3 stars, so not 2.5, but also not a glowing 4.5. Matt wrote, the translation from forum tracked mythology and YouTube shorts to theaters was an inevitability, but A24 was right to put Parsons in charge. At only 16 years old, Parsons had tens of millions of fans addicted to bite sized clips of found footage ambiguity, depicting random explorers lost to the backrooms, as well as Corporation Async, dedicated to backrooms research. But this isn't YouTube, and Hollywood isn't a child's playground. Parsons had plenty to prove with Backrooms, which turned out to be an impressive accomplishment for any teenager's future debut. Impressive, but not without issues that clog the overall flow of empty, threatening spaces and psychological torment. He wrote a full review at Daily Dead. If you want to know more about what held the film back for him, my assumption, I haven't read it, but my assumption is that like it is a lot of the same thing over and over again in some ways. Like you're in that space for a long time, and I think maybe that's why some people were like not that into it. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I mean, I was expecting that, and I think it was impressive to me how much it keeps going and justifies itself as a feature as it goes along.
Yeah, I agree with that. Chris Evangelista, friend of the show, gave it 4 stars. He wrote, hell yes, that's what I'm talking about. Has the suffocating dread and loneliness of a Kiyoshi Kurosawa film mixed with a surreal nature that grows increasingly unhinged. Kind of floored by this and by the fact that it's a feature debut from a 20-year-old. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I did walk out of it in a little bit of a daze. You know, I was like, what the heck? Like, how was that as good as it was? You know?
Mhm.
And in a good way. I was so excited. I was like, oh, this is just great news.
Kiyoshi Kurosawa is a good pull too. It does have that. I just recently watched Chime and Serpent's Path, and so the filmmaker's vision is fairly fresh on the mind. So that is a good pull. I'm surprised I didn't think about that.
There you go. There you go. That well, hey, that's Chris for you. Chris Evangelista, of course, from Slash Film. All right, and that's it. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about the film, Will, before we play the Rotten Tomatoes game? I feel like we covered about as much as we probably should. We don't want to get lost, you know? We don't want somebody to,
I
come
mean,
grab us.
I think there's interesting stuff to dig into as far as the like meteor stuff. I don't know if you want to do like a real quick like spoiler discussion after the
Sure, sure.
games, just like maybe like a 5 minute spoiler discussion. I just kind of want to pick your brain a little bit about like the thematics of it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. First, we'll just do a super brief Rotten Tomatoes game, and then we'll give you all the spoiler warning to get out of here if you haven't watched the movie yet. But yeah, Rotten Tomatoes score, we have 209 reviews counted. One of them's mine. You know, one of them's Rogan's. A few people we mentioned. So you kind of you have some clues there. Well, Ashton, what do you think? What's your best guess?
I'm getting the sense that the movie it's well liked, but as you kind of alluded to among our critic friends, it seems like it's maybe a little bit more divisive than Obsession.
There are a few naysayers, to be sure.
But I still think it's really getting positive reactions. I think a lot of people, at the very least, are baseline like 3 out of 5 impressed that a filmmaker so young and so fresh out of the gate made a film like this. So I'm gonna say 86%.
Oof, not even close. No, I'm just kidding. That was pretty close. 89%. You're only 3 off.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah. Just
Yeah, I
wanted to give
figured
you
it
a little bit of a
was.
scare, a little jump scare.
Yeah, I figured it was like maybe in the early '90s. I there was no way it was like all the way down in the '70s, but yeah, I was feeling like high '80s.
There you go. There you go. Okay, so yeah, 89% on Rotten Tomatoes could change, of course, as more people see it. Now, on the popcorn meter, that's the audience collected score, 5,000 plus verified ratings. What about that one, Will? I mean, it's got some hype behind it, but there are other things to consider.
I think with
Like,
this
oh,
one,
Michael's sold out again. Let's watch this one. It's got that
yeah,
happening young man from 12 Years a Slave.
yeah, who is very good. I didn't get a chance to say. I think I agree with you that his performance is outstanding and yeah, way better than I anticipated. Not because I expect him to be bad, but rather just because I expect him to kind of just maybe go through the motions with this a little bit. And he's actually giving a pretty
Yeah.
thoughtful
Like, look at this kid,
character.
like, all right, kid, like
Right.
when 12 Years a Slave came out, you were like in elementary school or whatever.
Hmm.
Kind of literally.
12, not even 12 years old a person.
Children of Men came out when Kane Parsons was born.
That's
2006?
crazy.
Isn't
Crazy.
that ridiculous? Wow. Anyway, sorry, your the audience score. What do you think?
So I think there may be more expectations with this one as far as the audience is concerned. Given the hype, as you mentioned, and also just the high box office, the online following. I feel like some folks, maybe their expectations will be too high. Maybe they don't really appreciate the more liminal atmospheric quality that's going for it. Maybe they want something more jump scare friendly. I think most people, though, are liking it. So I'm going to guess this has a 78% audience score.
Not a bad guess. You're only a few off once again, but do you think it's lower or higher than your guess?
Is it 74?
It's 74. Whoa, hey, that's exactly 74. How'd you do it?
I feel like audiences get weirdly down on horror movies that have a lot of hype like this. Like they're like, it ain't that scary. Yeah, I've been in an empty room before. That's nothing.
All right. Well, that's Backrooms. Let's or the Rotten Tomatoes game rather. Yeah. So, you wanted to talk real quick about some stuff that's a little bit more spoilery. So, if you are listening still and you're like, you still haven't seen the movie, probably want to back out now because we're going to talk about stuff specifically relating to, I assume, the ending and kind of what's going on, where the backrooms are, and all of that. So your final warning is now. I will say I kind of gestured a lot at my reading of the film and what I think I got out of it. In my own kind of review. I know you haven't had a chance to read it because you literally started recording like as soon as you finished the movie, so you're fresh off the presses. But yeah, I'm curious what you might think of my take on it. So I posted a review a few days ago on the site, and it's called Backrooms builds a cathedral out of our wish to disappear. And so I have a whole set of takes there. But yeah, where did you want to start?
I mean, just from what you were saying earlier, you have more of a like industry take on the film. Like you think it says
Industry?
more. Well, you were saying like against the slop of
Yeah,
like.
well, specifically, I think that there's an AI reading of this, and at first I was like, "Oh gosh, am I doing it again?" Like, seeing AI anxiety and like everything. But I do think it's very explicit in this movie in certain ways, and I did see a lot of other people have a similar reaction. So I'm like, okay, it's not just me. But essentially, like the setting it in the Bay Area specifically, which is like the mothership right now of this like AI technology. And specifically, like when you get to the end of the film and the Martiplas character is like, yeah, we're kind of just exploring this place, and it's a bit of a Pandora's box, and it is essentially like taking these ideas of like a not human version of human stuff, but completely wrong. Like that whole like parable about trying to draw a dog, like reminds me a lot of like how AI will try to like make human stuff, but it just because it hasn't experienced it, hasn't seen it, it
Sure.
doesn't work, right? And it plagiarizes. It takes things from the real world and kind of just messes them up. And it's still an extension of like, in some ways, the worst of us, like
Yeah.
realized you're the villain and like down to like a hand having like 6 fingers, like you would see in like AI slop and stuff
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. Right. But it also, the anxiety of it too speaks to how like Clark is that kind of person who finds himself trapped in this elsewhere that is just this sort of fake version of reality. It reminds me a lot of the people who get totally like spiraled out in like the AI technology and ultimately it consumes them, right? And they lose their humanity. They lose like the soul. Like these people who like end up dating like these AI chatbots and like ruining relationships in their real life. That's kind of what I got out of it. Obviously, that's just one take, and then
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt it. That's what I was thinking about. I don't know.
I think that's valid and something that crossed my mind, if not the main thing. And I think what you're getting at is the core reason why I think this is something that worked for me a little bit more than the Obsession is that, like, I think Obsession, there's basically one read of the film, and you either get it or you don't. I feel like it's not like, I mean, it's thoughtful in what it's saying in that regard, and how that movie. I'm trying to be a little vague because I don't want to spoil that film, because we're only in spoilers for Backrooms. But I think that movie's more about like entitled men and this idea of like feeling like they're owed these things and not really feeling like they're or appreciating women and maybe even taking advantage of them, or actually really taking advantage
Yeah,
of them.
it's
In this
about the
case.
difference between a love story and a
Right.
romance. And like there's a nice little moment in Obsession where the main guy is like literally like, well, what's the difference? And
Right.
that's the thesis of the movie. It's like he
Exactly.
doesn't know the difference between because he doesn't know or understand
Yeah.
her, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that movie, like I said, it's like it's thoughtful about that approach, but I don't think there's a lot of other ways to look at it. Whereas this movie, I think there's the AI component, but I think even more so there's the COVID component of the film. And it's
Yeah,
something that I
liminal
find,
spaces.
yeah, liminal spaces. Like I think we saw, more direct art that came out of COVID, and then there's like films that were artistic about it, like Asteroid City, that kind of took a different lens to it and had really thoughtful things to say about it in an indirect way. I feel like this movie, it's really fascinating about like the idea of like being literally trapped to these locations and feeling like this idea of like time is passing in a way that like you like are kind of lost in your own little world, and like there's this disconnect. And I saw some people were complaining about like the characters don't really feel as connected to one another, and I feel like that's so deliberate that it like kind of like I wonder some people kind of miss that point of it, like the idea of like characters aren't really connecting to each other, and like as this like backrooms thing kind of expands, like this like you said, like the liminal horror feels more pungent, I think, for this younger generation because so many of their, developmental years were kind of taken away from them and by being kind of trapped and isolated from these people. But I think there is also like I said, like this anxiety about like feeling kind of trapped to one age and like not really like with Chiwetel Ejiofor's character, like feeling like once you got to a certain place in life at a certain age, you kind of feel like you're entitled to these things, whether you've earned them or not, or whether you deserve them or not. And this idea of like Renee Renault's mom, like kind of having this
Renata
hypochondriac
Reinsev.
Renai Reinstein's mom having this kind of hypochondriac relationship to the outside world, kind of feeling like she wants to, prevent her from like being, tainted by it to the point where it literally like, kind of drives her insane. And then, it's all kind of for naught because, this house is destroyed as we see from the beginning of the film. And I don't know, I just think there's like a lot of interesting things being said there and talked about there that I feel like this film invites those invitations in a way that something like Obsession kind of has a more specific read. And I think I gravitate more towards a film like this that has more open-ended ideas as opposed to something that's kind of more starkly black and white. But I don't know. I just kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit about that. It had some interesting things I did too, specifically as we talked about in our general review.
Yeah, I think that there's something to be said, right, about how you do have two Gen Z characters in this movie who are both unceremoniously killed off screen, and the reason they die is because the authority figure, right? They're sort of like older, in this case, he's a baby boomer because it's the 90s, but, we were talking about those generational differences before, but like he like brings them in and he like just very, very, it's super dangerous. And like he is like, well, I'll pay you. He, like promises them, money for whatever, and feels no remorse for what happens to them. It's somewhat implied that he might have killed one of them. It's not super
Yeah.
clear. And I don't think it's supposed to be clear. And just yeah, like this brain rot is like what takes him over. And I think there's something very daring about that from a director who is in that kind of age bracket
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like, look at you old folks. And like, and I think like to what you're saying, the COVID stuff really did create this fascination with liminal spaces in the sense that like, you look at that era when things were shut down and the whole world was suddenly full of these liminal spaces. And Gen Z has been growing up in the era of dead malls, right?
Yep.
And these like abandoned malls that are so similar to this. People have been posting videos like just, in the wake of this movie being like, hey, look at this like secret hallway thing in the back of this movie theater, like nobody uses. And it's just super creepy. I was messaging Matt Serafini about it because his local AMC has that sort of thing. And somebody posted a literal video about it. And I was like, look at this. And he was like,
Oh yeah.
he literally was supposed to watch Backrooms in that theater. And he said he couldn't make it. And I was like, sounds like that's a good thing. Cause like, I don't want anything to happen.
I mean, I chose the CSN theater right across from my old mall in part for that reason. I was tempted to go out to Monroeville Mall to get the 5D experience of this film at the theater, where like the movie theater is like the only thing that's bustling at the Monroeville Mall, unfortunately, which is sad because it's part of film history with Dawn of the Dead. But yeah, I mean, it's it definitely feels like that's a piece. But I just think it's smart about like how time stands still, like that, like when the electrician comes in, the calendar falls off the wall, like the idea of the store never having any customers kind of gives it this eerie sort of like dead, like unclear vibe of like what time is. But even like other locations, like when he goes to visit those two Gen Z characters, there's like no one else around. There's like all these like sort of empty, dead spaces around. And it gives this kind of cold, otherworldly, like time stands still vibe that I don't know. It just reminds me of like with COVID when you'd like if you ever did go out to drive or something, like all the streets were eerily empty, or and
Yeah,
it
you
just
have a
like yeah,
scene where Mary meets his COVID bubble.
yeah, right,
And, like, yeah, it is oh my gosh, there's that very gross moment of, like, you could even eat them, you know? It's just, like it's just so
oh yeah,
grotesque and it's so over the top and, like yeah,
I
I do think this is a movie that really sums up 2020 through 2025, which
yeah,
is this profoundly bizarre, weird, transitional phase for, I think, a lot of not just American culture, but a lot of, like, the world. Like, a lot of ridiculous, like, wild things happened that just felt like things kinda slowed to a halt, especially, like, I know for us millennials, like, we've seen a lot of this stuff happen since the '90s, like, we've seen it firsthand, like, these big shifts, and I think for Gen Z, it's probably a little bit similar to, like, when we started making movies in, like, the early 20 teens, and for us, it was, like, Bush era anxiety. It was stuff
sure, yeah,
related to, like, the war in Iraq and, all this stuff around, Katrina and natural disasters, climate
well,
change, these things that are like, "Oh my god, like, the world is ending. Like, what are we doing about it?" And for Gen Z, it's sort of like, "Is the world ending? I guess. Maybe it already ended." And, like, we're just sort
right,
of, like, slowly dying. And it's like it's an existential dread that is
yeah.
like, whew, it just it makes you feel something, that's for sure.
Sure. And the 70s too. I mean, like Vietnam and like the Cold
Yeah.
War and all these things, like every day kind of feels like it could be the last day. We're also in this like senseless, endless war that has no consequences and young people are dying every day and all this. Yeah, I don't know. There's like, I don't know. I think that's also part of the reason why, like, look at the Long Walk, which became like last year, like this big horror hit, even though it was like based on a 70s novel about Vietnam. Like it became like this weirdly big hit for like Gen Z because they can relate to this idea of like young people kind of like just dying unceremoniously in this like deprived kind of situation. I don't know. It just interesting how things kind of cycle in these weird, interesting ways. The only note I have to say though about the eating the guy is I really wanted the guy whose stomach was getting like pulled out to just when they were talking, just him slowly like having the fork and just like eating because like he makes a plate for him, and I
Yeah,
just kind of
yeah.
want him to be the only one that was eating it.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't mention this during the review because I wanted to maybe hold it a little close to my chest, but I see a lot of David Lynch in Kane Parsons. Like his kind of like some of his like
Sure.
emulations or
Yeah. I
influences.
mean,
Specifically like David Lynch in terms of the sound, like the industrial sound, the faulty electricity, like just being able to like bring a lot of terror out of like the feeling of being stuck and enclosed. But, like, his take on it is it feels lonelier than David Lynch in a way, and that to me is what makes it stand out, I guess.
the scene that we're talking about is basically like Rabbits, his
Yeah.
short film that he used in part for Inland Empire. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I wanted to avoid using the term Lynchian because it's just so overused, but yeah, I mean, I have to imagine David Lynch was a big influence.
I
I think it's sort
usually
of
avoid it
undeniable. Yeah,
myself. I usually avoid it, but I think this is one of those exceptions where I thought it was fitting. Yeah.
yeah, sure, yeah,
I mentioned 3 other things that stuck out to me as influences, or at least things that I was thinking of in my review. I mentioned the Blair Witch Project, which I brought up earlier. Also, this Night of the Living Dead sticks out to me a lot in so many ways because of like the way he's weaving the social commentary into these like character driven stories that essentially you have like this kind of world that's on fire, thank God for movies, but like this world that's like kind of like ending and the movie's just sort of like orbiting how all of that's affecting people on a very like grounded level. And it's so surreal and like the characters just like don't even know like what to do with this information. Like, yeah, there's just this like never ending bunch of hallways. And like they have a hard time like coping with it. The other thing that stuck out to me was Resident Evil. Now I know you're not into like video games and stuff. But I'm not really gesturing to the movies, which I know you were saying earlier. It's like, oh, there's like 700 Resident Evil movies. But the video games, like there's a video game logic to this. This feeling of like going from like room to room. The The scene with, like, the characters felt straight out of, like, one of the Resident Evil games that's, like, in this, like, house out in the middle of nowhere. And also, I think that in terms of, like, the video game stuff, like, there is this, like, 2020s sort of vibe of, like, watching streamers, watching people, have their own kind of found footage adventure through a horror thing, and you're sort of, like, watching it parasocially. And this movie almost kinda, like, plays around with that to some small extent. But, yeah, I mean, I thought that was another cool thing about it. It's like, especially, like, the async people, it reminds me so much of, like, the Umbrella Corporation and, like,
Sure.
how they yeah, all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate how much this movie, like, even in the, like, semi-casual moments has, like, the dread that you feel in movies like the uncanny otherworldly dread of like It Follows, as I mentioned in Obsession, a review of Obsession, but also like The Ring. I remember that movie also has like this uncanniness, like this kind like this rainy dread throughout, and I kind of feel like this movie has a similar kind of just in the opposite way. It's like everything's like too sunny and like too clean in a way that's like disquieting, like almost to the opposite degree of like The Ring, where it's just like everything feels too presentable to a fault, and I guess that kind of adds to your AI reading, like this whole idea of like the world feeling like sterile, basically. But I also was thinking of like, I mean, some of the more obvious ones are like The Shining, obviously, like this big liminal space that drives someone mad, like Cube, same deal. There's one scene in this that really just made me think about Synecdoche, New York, which really tickled me pink. This like idea of like kind of just making like a cube within a cube within a cube, basically. Yeah, I think the fact that such a young filmmaker can like have these sort of influences, but not make them overly apparent in a way that like something like The Substance, I feel like has like the shining influence, but it's like, oh, the carpet is the same. And like this movie, like I feel like it's more embedded into the fabric of the film, no pun intended, in a way that's more organic to its own self. So yeah, I think that's part of the reason why I'm endeared to this film so much.
Awesome. Yeah. We both clearly liked it. Again, I if I had to pick between watching both movies, I would watch Obsession at a like with some friends, stuff like that. This is more the movie I'd maybe like watch alone, just to kind of like experience it again and like really sit with it and take super seriously or whatever. But it's just yeah, it's just two different vibes.
I
And for
get what
me, it's
you're
like hard
saying.
to compare, I guess. Like I wouldn't give them even like different ratings. I think they're both like 8 out of 10s for me if I had to like grade them.
Obsession is a movie you watch at the sleepover with Maverick and all your friends. And
You could only name one of them. You're like Maverick and
well, I didn't know if I wanted to. I didn't know. No, I know your other friends.
I know.
I
It
didn't.
was
Well,
funny the
Parth.
way
Well, we can mention Parth because he's been on the show. I didn't want to
that's true.
put
That's
your.
true.
I didn't want to put your other friends on the spot because like they're not podcast people. I didn't. I wanted to respect their
I got you.
privacy.
I saw it was funny.
But Parth, I forgot was in our
Well,
Obsession
no.
movie. So
Corey Woodruff, Matt Serafini, Chris Sheridan, Will Ashton. We're just having a big sleepover,
right in our matching onesie PJs.
in a studio apartment with just,
Yeah,
sleeping
but
bags from wall to
Backrooms
wall.
is like type of film you watch on your laptop at midnight, alone in
Yeah.
the dark in your room. I get it. Yeah.
Fair. Yeah, it's kind of that for me anyway. Was there anything else? That about covers it for me.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about the themes of the film without getting into spoilers. So thanks for letting me talk a little bit about that.
You're welcome. It wasn't easy, but
Mm.
glad it could happen. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening to this, I guess, kind of extended episode. Thank God for movies, considering we only did talk about one movie. But there was a lot to talk about, to be fair. So thank you for sticking with us. And we will be back soon, I think. I think the next movie coming out is Masters of the Universe. I should be watching that. Even though I missed my screening today, I should be seeing that
Are
on Thursday. Yeah.
we doing that over a scary movie? New
I
scary
don't
movie?
know. I don't know. I'm gonna see Scary Movie as well. I don't know when I'm gonna see it because I'm kind of scared to watch it like on Thursday. Because I feel like it'll be a lot of weirdos. But if I maybe go in at like 9 a.m. or something, like I watched Pressure, then maybe it'll be just me and like one weirdo, and two weirdos
Well,
total.
you do watch your horror movies at 10 a.m. Why not watch your horror comedies at 9 a.m.?
There you go. I did. I watched Pressure at 9 a.m. 9:10 a.m. is awesome. There's no better way to do it, in my opinion. Popcorn tastes better for breakfast, in my opinion. But hey, well, it could be a double billing. We could watch both movies. Why not?
That's true. Yeah,
You
I
sound
know
tired just saying that.
like I don't expect Scary Movie 2026 to be good, but like I need to see it. I don't know if that makes sense. Like it's something I have to see the dumb satire be brought back, the spoof.
I think
It's just
yeah, I don't think I'm gonna like either movie. I'll probably laugh at a couple things in Scary Movie, it's maybe,
I
but
mean,
I think neither movie I think is gonna be there's gonna be much to really talk
I
about.
I was not hyped for Master Universe until I saw someone their first reaction was just comparing it to I Saw a TV Glow. So I'm like, okay, well, that I don't expect. That intrigues me.
Sure. I guess. Huh. Alright, well, we'll see how that goes, and, we'll I'm sure we'll make some decision at the last second, who knows what'll happen, but once again, thank you so much for listening to Thank God for Movies. Go to thankgodformovies.com to find more episodes of the show, along with written stuff, if you're curious, and, I think that's about all we got. Thank you again. From the Internet California, I am John Negroni.
And for the Internet Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.
Ooh, John, what's this secret room I found?